Back in October, I made a video about Phantasmagoria 2, and it got me thinking back fondly to my time with Sierra Adventure games as a kid, fruitlessly attempting to explore their rich worlds and decipher their bafflingly obtuse puzzles, spending hours upon hours in these wonderfully crafted, often cinematic stories. For 2020, I decided to go back to my childhood and play through as many of these games as I can, and sort of chronicle my journey through Sierra.
Sierra Online introduces a whole new dimension in software entertainment. With cinematic quality animation, unmatched interactive gameplay, improved parser flexibility, and incredible full stereo sound.
For this first series, I'll be playing through the Gabriel Knight Trilogy, a series that maybe didn't become as iconic as Space Quest or Leisure Suit Larry, but its memorable protagonist and intriguing storylines make it a notable franchise in the Sierra library nonetheless. Written, designed, and directed by Jane Jensen, Gabriel Knight's Sins of the Fathers was released for PC on December 17, 1993, and quickly garnered fanfare for its deep story, detailed graphics, and mature themes. It was well received by critics and won Computer Gaming World's Best Adventure Game of the Year, sharing the glory with Day of the Tentacle and beating the very popular Myst. The CD-ROM version of the game, which is the one I'll be playing through today, boasts an impressive voice cast featuring the likes of Tim Curry, Mark Hamill, and Leah Remini, and features over 7,300 lines of dialogue, something extremely rare for a game released during that time. Today I'll be reviewing the GOG version of the game. See, I had the Trilogy for Steam, but was having problems with DOSBox scaling properly for my monitor, so I picked them up again on GOG for like $3 each. And they're the ScumVM versions, which seem to work a lot better on my modern PC. In this point-and-click adventure game, the player takes on the titular role of Gabriel Knight, a chauvinistic, womanizing author who owns a rare bookstore in New Orleans, who decides to write his new novel about a series of murders that begin popping up around the city that seem to have some sort of connection to voodoo. Aiding him in his research and minding the store while he's gone is his friend and assistant Grace, who not only gives him helpful pieces of research, but is someone who can handily stand up to Gabriel's near-constant inappropriate workplace conduct, calling him on his BS every step of the way.
I bet. Just a minute. It lives, I see. Do you want to speak with Lolita? I'm sorry, but Gabriel is allowed. Oh, I mean, he's out. Yeah, if he ever comes back, I'll tell him. You know, you could do better. I know I don't know you, but you could do better.
Told over the course of 10 days, acting as chapter markers, the game begins with Gabriel rolling out of bed, ghosting his latest conquest, and getting a few leads from Grace on where to go to get more information on voodoo. Right at the top, I'd like to apologize for not having subtitles turned on in this. They were off by default, and I didn't realize they could be enabled until I was at the very end of the game, so you'll see them pop up later on. After getting his messages from Grace and reading about the latest murder in the paper, Gabriel heads off to find out some more info about this voodoo stuff. When you initiate the dialogue with Grace for the first time, it quickly becomes evident that the conversation choices in this game are way more robust than most adventure titles of the time, with a large list of options that grow as the game progresses. By the last few chapters, there's so many dialogue choices it becomes completely overwhelming, adding to the frequent trial and error style of gameplay that is too frequently required to progress. In one of the messages, Grace tells Gabriel that his buddy Detective Mosley had some photos for him at the police station, a photograph of the latest victim. Right from the beginning, there are 9 different locations you can visit, and without any real clue as to where to go or what to do, I just kind of went everywhere and spoke to everyone. There's a historical voodoo shop where the owner is out for the day, the drugstore that also sells voodoo items, the park, the overlook to the park, Gabriel's grandma's house, a bar, a church, and then of course the police station and bookstore. When visiting his grandmother, Gabriel finds out that she wants him to go through some of his father's old things in the attic. There he finds his dad's sketchbook, and after cracking a puzzle on a clock, he discovers a hidden compartment containing a photograph and a letter written in German. He asks his grandmother about it, but she doesn't know too much, and it's hard to decipher without knowing the language, but he figures out there's something called a Schottenjäger involved. It's really too bad Gabriel wasn't working on this stuff like 10 years later after smartphones became ubiquitous sources of all human knowledge. So Gabriel needs to figure out where the latest voodoo murders crime scene is, and of course, that crabby desk sergeant won't let him. So he heads to the park where he lures an annoying mime down to bother a cop hanging out nearby. After the cop leaves his bike, Gabriel checks the radio and gets the location of the murder. At the crime scene, Gabriel meets up with Mosley, and after poking around for a bit, we're introduced to Malia Getty, a wealthy heiress that of course Gabriel instantly falls in love with.
Good day, gentlemen.
Whoa, I'm in love. Forget it, that's Malia Getty. She's about as far out of your reach as the moon.
The police then leave, and Gabriel has the opportunity to snoop around a bit more, making note of some markings on the ground. In my initial visit here, I actually missed something because like a fool, I decided to get as far as I could without a walkthrough. But if you look at this little patch of grass here and use the magnifying glass on it, Gabriel will find a snake scale that will definitely be an important piece of evidence later. From here, it's back to the police station where you'll have Gabriel do some tricky stuff to get a copy of the police file on the murders. In it, he finds more cryptic symbols that seem to be related to voodoo in some way. Back at the bookstore, Gabriel asks Grace to do some research on Malia Getty because he's a dirty creep, and the day ends.
What's your interest in her?
Oh, just, stuff about the voodoo murders. If you could get an address...
They're murders. Right. I'll see what I can find out.
In between the day transitions, Gabriel's constantly having these nightmares involving a woman turning into a leopard, some kind of talisman getting splashed with blood, and then his body hanging from a tree. Although he's not sure what any of this means, we all know that it's somehow related to the case. Day 2 begins, and the first thing Gabriel does is heads over to Malia's house after Grace gives him the address, but her butler won't let him in, so of course the logical thing to do is to head to the police station, turn the heat up, causing Mosley to get hot and take off his jacket, and then steal his police badge when he's out getting some coffee. Yeah, at this point, I was pretty much just using the guide. To my knowledge, there aren't any skippable items that would cause you to not be able to complete the game like in some other Sierra Adventure titles, but the combination of the massive amount of dialogue choices, locations, and very little guidance as far as what you should be doing for the sake of keeping my footage to a manageable level, I said screw it and kept the guide open. I still tried to suss out Gabriel's next steps on my own, however, which is probably why you'll see I didn't have a full score by the end of the game. Back to Malia's place, and after showing the badge to the butler, Gabriel's allowed to speak to her, though aside from some awful flirting, there's not much to be gained here other than an almost guarantee that she'll be back in the picture at some point. Because Malia saw Gabriel and Mosley the day before, she was totally aware that Gabriel wasn't Mosley and just using his badge the whole time, and after a cringeworthy flirt session, she asked him to leave.
Excuse me, but your eyes are really distracting. I don't think I've ever seen a color quite like that. Brownish gold. It's so deep and rich. Man, if I could bottle that, I'd make a fortune.
Thank you, Detective. That's an interesting observation, though probably not relevant to your case.
Next is one of the more amusing but random bits of point and clicking. Gabriel heads to the park and sees a hot dog vendor there. He gives the hot dog vendor a coupon that he pulled out of the cash register at the bookstore, and then the vendor gives him a hot dog. You then have to give the hot dog to this tap dancing kid. Then up on the next screen, you see the wind blow away the drawing of an artist. You get the kid to retrieve the drawing, and because this guy now owes you one, Gabriel has him recreate the full pattern of symbols from the partials that he has from the police file and the crime scene. He just has to come back the next day to pick it up. Gabriel remembers that when he went to the voodoo shop yesterday, the owner was out, so he heads back and meets Dr. John and gets some more information about voodoo practices. By the way, Dr. John is voiced by Michael Dorn, who played Lieutenant Worf in Star Trek The Next Generation. There's actually a ton of historic information held within this game, with several of the characters just talking your ear off about New Orleans and voodoo history if you let them. A lot of it is actually very interesting stuff, but like many of the dialogue trees in this game, it tends to get a bit overwhelming. You're never really sure what might be important and what's simply flavor for the story. Either way, the sheer amount of dialogue in this game is insanely impressive for the time. The level of difficulty in parsing out this information is not something that most of us are used to for modern games. While visiting the drugstore, Gabriel witnesses an elderly woman enter and buy some ingredients to cast a curse on someone, and although the store owner doesn't help with where she lives, back at the bookstore, Grace is on it, and the day ends. The next day, after his morning coffee and paper read, Gabriel uses the piece of the phone book Grace gives him to call the numbers looking for the old woman. At this point, I'm questioning Grace's research skills a bit. I mean, how would you feel if you asked an employee to research something and they came back a day later with a torn out phone book page? At least figure out which number is right. Then again, if this guy was my boss, I'd probably do the bare minimum too. So he figures out where the lady is, but before he goes to see her, he stops in at the police station to find Mosley has arrested a suspect in the voodoo murder, some junkie named Crash, who clearly didn't do it. Next, we go to the cemetery and see Malia exiting her family tomb, and once again, he throws himself at her, though this time she seems way more receptive to his advances.
I can't stop thinking about you. I've been in your thoughts too. I can see it in your eyes.
Mr. Knight, you don't know anything about me. I'm not in a position to get involved.
I've said that a million times myself, but this is different. I think we both know we can't fight it. Oh, I can't believe I'm saying this.
Then Gabriel goes to the university to attend a voodoo lecture, which is ridiculously long, and speaks to the professor, who takes a look at the completed drawing that the artist did and identifies the symbol as a veve, a religious symbol used in voodoo rituals, and asks if he can come back a little bit later after he does some research. So now, in order to prepare to visit the old lady, Gabriel goes to the church and he steals a priest outfit. Then he puts it on and pretends to be a priest so the lady will let him in. The lady shows him this snake bracelet thing and says she thinks it's some kind of cursed item that's been in her family for several generations. Acting as the good priest he is, Gabriel blesses the bracelet and banishes the curse, but during this blessing, he uses some clay he found by the water at the crime scene to cast a mold of the item. It's not entirely clear why this thing is important yet, and at this point I really had no idea how anything I've done so far pertains to the murder investigation. I was just kind of hoping these items would coalesce in some sort of meaningful way. So we have a mold of this snake thing, but we're going to need to help Gabriel make an exact replica of the actual bracelet. To do this, we first have to head back to the bookstore and sell a family painting to some dude for $100. Then we take that money to the drugstore and buy this gator mask, and we get a bonus luck potion as I guess some kind of promotion that the store is doing. Finally, Gabriel goes to the bar and speaks to the man playing chess, who has been on a losing streak, and hooks him up with the luck potion. He beats his opponent, and wouldn't you happen to know that the guy turns out to be a jeweler who agrees to cast the snake mold for free. After all this exhausting work, Gabriel decides to go home and go to bed, but he gets a late night visitor. That's right, Malia Getty comes over for a passionate night with Mr. Knight, finally accepting that she has feelings for him for some reason.
Oh, I could show you around a little. It's not much, but...
Please, don't. I couldn't focus on much of anything right now.
Yeah, I know. God, what is it about you?
Just shut up and kiss me.
The next morning, Grace tells Gabriel that she was doing some research on the crime scene patterns and found out that it was the same pattern that was used in a series of killings back in the 1800s. And also, there's now this creepy guy just standing there staring in the window nonstop. They do mention it at one point, but it seems like they just kind of accept that this dude is here now. While reading the paper, Gabriel also discovers that, much to his surprise, the voodoo murder case has officially been closed by the police, who blamed them on a cartel war involving some gangsters from Chicago. Of course, Gabriel knows that this is complete BS. After picking up the completed bracelet from the jeweler, Gabriel heads to the Jackson Park overlook, and while peering through the binoculars, he sees Crash talking to one of the many street drummers scattered throughout the city. He sees him slink off into the church and follows him in. After showing Crash the bracelet, he reveals a snake tattoo on his chest and tells Gabriel that the snake is the sign of an underground voodoo cartel. The whole thing with the drummers was that they all work for the cartel and use their drums to communicate, sort of like the homeless people in John Wick 2. He then immediately and seemingly randomly dies, and Gabriel heads to the police station to tell Mosley about it and bitch at him for closing the voodoo murders case. Then he heads home to call it a day, but before that, he calls back this number from Germany who's been calling him for the last few days. It turns out that this guy is the brother of Gabriel's grandfather, and he's been having the same dreams as Gabriel. He says that Gabriel is the descendant of a very important family, the Ritters, and he's destined to take up the family's business. He doesn't necessarily say what that business is, but because Gabriel doesn't feel like going to Germany, the guy says he's going to mail him a book about his family. Then he calls Malia and acts creepy, and she tells him to come over.
It's me. I can't sleep.
Me neither.
Can I?
Yes. Come.
The next morning, the book from Germany has arrived, setting a new record for the Postal Service, and Gabriel gets a call from the professor saying he found some important things with the symbols he's researching. In the Ritter book, Gabriel learns of his ancestors being hired as witch hunters, and one of them going up against an evil witch named Tetelo, who seduced him into helping her carry out a series of murders not unlike the ones happening right now. The book speaks of a talisman that can be used to fight the evil, but it says that Tetelo got it from him. Grace also gives him a book on Rada drum codes, which he can use to figure out what the drummers are communicating around town. Gabriel heads over to Dr. John's place to ask him some more questions, but when he arrives, he gets attacked by a python and must turn on the lights to make him go away. Then Dr. John comes in and says,
Good day, Mr. Knight.
That thing just tried to kill me.
He did? I am sorry. The museum is closed today, you see, and we were not expecting visitors.
which is his excuse for having a giant snake loose in the store. At any rate, there was a scale left on Gabriel from the attack, and wouldn't you know it, it's the same type of scale found at the crime scene. In a day that seems to be getting worse and worse for old Gabriel, he goes to the university to find the professor dead. You know you're having a rough go of it when you say,
Ah! Oh God, not again.
referring to finding dead people. So he grabs the professor's research, calls Mosley, and goes to the cemetery to decode those messages on the side of a tomb. This involves one of the few actual puzzles in the game where you use the book to send the message to Dr. John, setting up a meet. Back to the police station, Gabriel meets with Mosley and convinces him to reopen the case by giving him all the various bits of evidence that he's collected over the last few days. Mosley says he thinks this cult must be pretty far-reaching, so he's going to keep everything on the down low for the time being. The next morning, Grace arrives to the bookstore to find a half-dead chicken on the floor and what looks to be some kind of warning to Gabriel. They seem a bit alarmed at first, but far more calm than they probably should be. I mean, they basically clean up the mess and open the shop like nothing ever happened. Like a crazed voodoo cult member didn't break in and half-murder a chicken on their floor. After the cleanup, an envelope arrives from Mosley that contains the lock to his office and a letter saying that he dug deeper and found that indeed there are a lot of powerful people involved in this cult and that he needs to go off the grid to investigate further. Gabriel then has Grace to make a copy of the same tattoo Crash had onto his own chest and heads to the park to get the response to his crypt message from the drummer and confirms that there will be a conclave tonight. Before leaving, Gabriel convinces the beignet guide to go back outside the police station, and at the police station, Gabriel uses the officer's love for those doughy treats as a distraction to enter Mosley's office and grab a tracker. He takes the tracker over to Dr. John's place and hides it in this box that will be used for the ceremony. The bayou is now available as a location, and when he goes there, Gabriel uses the tracker to find the spot, then takes off his shirt, puts on the alligator mask that we bought earlier to hide himself. And this is where the game tests if you've been paying attention, because even though it seems obvious that it's Gabriel, Dr. John doesn't really realize it, and he quizzes him with some voodoo trivia. During the ritual, he gets a face full of some kind of hallucinogen and realizes that Malia is there and she's been taken over by the spirit of Tetelo, the witch that was mentioned in the family's book.
Gabriel!
Come take a ride.
Malia.
I know you. I can smell his blood in your veins.
No.
You cannot change your destiny or ours.
No.
I will find. I will destroy you.
No!
The next morning, Grace wakes Gabriel up and tells him that she followed him to the ritual and brought him home after he passed out. She tells him that he needs to get his shit together and call his great uncle in Germany to figure out what to do. His uncle tells him that he's got to find the talisman to stop Tetelo, so he heads to the Getty crypt in the cemetery, but all he finds there is the body of Mosley. Someone bonks him on the head, and when he wakes up, Mosley's body is gone, but his wallet is still there. Dazed, he goes back to the bookstore and gets a message from Grace that says his uncle found what he was looking for, presumably referring to the talisman, and Gabriel decides to use Mosley's credit card to book a trip to Germany. At the Ritter Manor, he finds out that his uncle Wolfgang has already set out on his adventure, and that he's supposed to hang out there for a bit. Here you have to go around and collect all these little bits of things to do this ritual to officially become a Schottenjäger.
Your soul smells, Gabriel Knight. You seek to be Schottenjäger.
I do.
You must first burn away the past. How much sin do you have to burn? You have used people all your life, never committed to anything. Turn back now, and I will forget that you asked for this.
No!
There are only two things that redeem you. First, that you have Ritter blood in your veins. Second, that 3 women have loved you purely. You asked to start on the path, so you shall. But you will not be a Schottenjäger until you have earned it.
How?
I cannot show you the path, but I can tell you that you will have to let go of the greater part of yourself, Gabriel Knight.
No problem.
And after doing so, you get access to the family library where you can read more about what you're up against with this Tutelo character. This made for one of the most frustrating moments in the game when you have to read these books on various shelves, but even with the guide, I could not for the life of me get it to trigger. Finally, after clicking everywhere, I got all the books and was able to move on to finding Wolfgang and getting the talisman.
Oh my God. It's a wheel within a wheel.
So Gabriel is off to Africa to find the wheel within a wheel and help Wolfgang get the talisman. Here you have to go around in this set of rooms and pick up these tiles and place them in the right spots. After you get them all in the right place, it triggers a door to open, but it also wakes up a whole bunch of angry zombies who start to attack Gabriel. This is one of the few places that you can actually die in the game. After getting past the zombies, he ends up finding his uncle, and the two make their way to the inner circle where the tomb of Tetelo lies. The lid to the tomb doesn't come off even after placing these rods in it, and Wolfgang says Gabriel has to go grab the heart of one of the ghouls to perform a sacrifice, but when he stabs the zombie, it ends up exploding his uncle's chest, killing him instantly.
Wolfgang! No!
With the talisman in hand, Gabriel goes back to New Orleans to end Tetelo's reign of terror once and for all, but when he gets back to the bookstore, he's surprised to discover that Mosley's still alive, and he was the one who bonked Gabriel on the head thinking that he was one of the Voodoo cartel members, and Mosley informs Gabriel that Grace has been kidnapped by the bastards, and now's the time to infiltrate the headquarters to get her back, bringing down the cartel in the process. Their base is located under the church, through an elevator in one of the confessional booths. Gabriel heads down, making sure to leave a tracker in place so that Mosley will be able to find him down there, and he begins searching through this sci-fi version of the wheel within a wheel to trying to find Grace. After locating her, Mosley shows up right on cue and the two disguise themselves as members, biding their time before deciding to make their strike.
Here, it's a disguise. Gee, a boar. How thoughtful. And what are you, pray tell?
A wolf?
You goddamn wiener.
In the center of the circle, the ritual begins, but right as Grace is about to be sacrificed to Tetelo, the two jump into action and save the day. Mosley blasts a hole in Dr. John's chest, and Gabriel throws the talisman to him and Grace for protection. Before slitting his throat, Gabriel pleads to Malia to not do it if she's still in there, and her hesitation is enough to allow Gabriel to smash the relic and cause a rift to open in the ground, causing Malia/Tetelo to fall in.
Go ahead. Destroy her. Destroy me. You are truly your father's son, witch hunter.
Gabriel tries to save her, but in one final moment, Tetelo takes over Molly and slices his arm, causing him to drop her in the lava pit. Afterwards, we see Gabriel and Grace chatting, with Gabriel saying he's going back to Germany to fulfill his destiny as the Schottenjäger, and the credits begin to roll.
You've changed, you know.
Have I?
Yeah. So, are you gonna do it? Be Schottenjäger?
I'm gonna try. Don't worry, though. You'll be back at school, safe and sound.
I don't have to go back.
Grace, give up your PhD?
There are things in this world, Gabriel. A spiritual path can be more important than a path of the mind.
Spiritual path, huh? Well, you're welcome to stay, Gracie. Just as long as you don't expect me to know what I'm doing.
Although I think Sins of the Fathers does contain some very dated gameplay for today's standards, it's still an incredibly compelling game with a great story and memorable characters. It gets bogged down a bit by the metric ton of dialogue and typical 90s point-and-click logic, but if you're not adverse to using a guide to get you through the tedious bits, it remains a tremendous amount of fun. It's almost worth it just to hear Tim Curry ham it up as Gabriel Knight as well. The game was remade back in 2014 in celebration of the 20th anniversary, and interestingly, it was developed by Pinkerton Road Studios, a company founded by series creator Jane Jensen. I didn't play this version since I'm a bit more partial to the classic hand-drawn style of the original, but I think it's great she's still wanting to deliver adventure games. She is, after all, one of the key talents in evolving those mobile hidden object games into something much more than just tapping objects on a screen. Unfortunately, when I tried to visit the Pinkerton Road website, I found it was taken down, and upon further research, it looks like the studio closed its doors after the lukewarm reception of Gabriel Knight 20th Anniversary and their other adventure title, Mobius. Next time, I'll be diving into Gabriel Knight's next adventure, The Beast Within, so stay tuned. If you dug the video, consider giving it a like and subscribe for more Sierra Adventure game videos coming this year. And let me know in the comments if you prefer more long-form discussion of the plot like this or a more condensed review style video. I enjoy doing both, but I'm curious to hear what you like. Until next time, for Film Pulse, my name's Adam Patterson, and I'll see you later.